First, let's gain some perspective. Now, the first linear perspective was created by Brunelleschi in 1415, lauded for his use of the vanishing point to give proportional depth to the 2D image. This looks perfectly ordinary these days. In fact, probably most of the people in this room could draw a one-point perspective just like this, showing scale, proportion, and giving the sense of depth as we pull backwards into the image. And that is where the idea of the vanishing point, which we're going to talk about over and over this morning, came from. So, this is what's called the vanishing point for those who don't know. This is an arbitrary point in space that all lines are leading back to. So you can see if we trace it down to the bottom of this portico here, that's going back to this point. If we look at these steps, 1, 2, 3, they're all going back to that same point. If we look at the point of the top of the door here, at the architrave, that's going back here. Even the top of this side of the building as it fades off into obscurity is going back there. Top of the soffit lining, everything is going back to the vanishing point. And that vanishing point gives control and proportion to everything in the image because it's all going back to that same point. If we think about standing in the middle of a street with buildings either side of us, everything's shrinking back down to that vanishing point. It's fading away into nothing and into obscurity. So that's a way that you can wrap your head around it. It's the way our eyes see and register information, is that it's getting smaller and smaller as it gets further away from us. And so what we're doing is mathematically replicating that to give the illusion that a 2D image is actually three-dimensional. Here's another example, Raphael's School of Athens. If anyone's been to the museums in Italy, you'd see all sorts of paintings just like this from the Renaissance period. Now here we can tell where the vanishing point is actually pretty important. It's right beneath these two gentlemen centered in the middle of the image. And not only does it give proportion to everything, so these people are larger than these people, and this archway is larger than the archways in the background, and everything's leading back there, it also tells the viewer where to look. So the vanishing point has two tools there. A, give everything proportion. B, tell us what to look at, which is important for symbolism, it's important for direction, it's important for composition. Morning. All of those things. So once again, vanishing point, very, very strong. Here's another example, much later than the Renaissance, now coming into the Impressionist period in France. And we see once again, the vanishing point's right underneath this guy's chin. And so the focal point comes back down to that point. Everything we see here, the bridge, the balustrade, the top of the truss, the pathway, even the buildings in the background, are all pointing back to this one spot. Da Vinci, if you recognize this, adoration of the Magi, everything's leading back to that one central point we have here. So the leading lines in the tiles, the roof up over the top here, the top of the roof, these steps, the people, even the heads of the people are all leading back to this one line as well. The arches, we can see the top of this arch is slightly larger than the top of the next arch, which is slightly larger than the top of the next arch again. So even though if we were standing in this building, all of these arches would be exactly the same height. We know that because they're all right next to each other. But if we were looking at it on this angle, we also know if we were standing in this room, they would have the illusion that they're each getting smaller than the previous. And so that's what the perspective is doing. So, can we have more than one vanishing point? What do you think? Yes! How many vanishing points can we have? You look like you have an idea. What do you think? 3? Yeah? Yeah. Typically, you wouldn't have more than 3 ever because you're really starting to warp your image based on that point, but we'll get there. So first, let's have a look at a 2-point perspective. So once again, looking at French art here, we see that we have 2 vanishing points. So on this side of the corner, everything is pointing back down here. All of these orange lines are pointing back down to this point here in the image. If we turn around the corner of the building to the other side, everything here, all of our blue lines are pointing to this point. And so what that does is that gives the illusion of depth going around a corner. So if we have a room which is flat to us, the plane is parallel to the way in which we're looking, then we only need 1 vanishing point. But if we approach something like a corner, be that a corner coming towards us or the corner of the room pushing away from us, we need 2 vanishing points because we know they're going to have 2 directions of lines moving away from us. Here's another example from one of my all-time favourites. Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, we can see two vanishing points here. We've got one which is pulling to this point here, vanishing point 1 or VP1, and then the other side is all the way over here off the sheet. So you can tell that Hopper has actually been able to do this by eye. He knows where the vanishing point is as he's drawing, as he's sketching, and we'll get into that later, how to do this manually. But he knows where that vanishing point is going, and he's done it perfectly. I've done this digitally. I've put the lines over the top, and they're still all lining up at the correct point, even though he's done it by eye. And that comes with practice and knowing what you're doing, and you'll get there very shortly as well. It's quite a simple technique, but it gives a lot to the image, makes it feel real. Another Hopper, Morning Sun, another favourite of mine. Two vanishing points, and once again, another one all the way off the sheet. And there's power to doing this by putting the vanishing point all the way off the sheet, because it gives a sense of mystery, intrigue, and it pulls our eye away from the centre of where we're looking. So the previous one, where it was right at the focal point of where the two gentlemen were standing inside the Athens Cathedral, is the opposite. They're saying, look here and only look here, this is your focal point. Whereas Hopper is kind of talking about the mystery and anonymity and isolation, really, of the city. And so he wants to have not one focal point, but many, so that we start to look at the faces and we start to get a sense of the emotion. What happens when we misuse vanishing points? Does anybody know what happens when we don't play with the vanishing points correctly? Morning. Yeah, Peter.
Loss of any sense of proportion or order to the image?
Correct. We lose proportion and order. So De Chirico, if anyone knows Giorgio De Chirico, he's doing it intentionally. So I've tried to overlay his vanishing points over the top of this image, and we can see I stopped at 4. There's more than that, it just keeps going. So the top of this building and the bottom of the same building are going the blue lines, but then if you try and look at the windows and the arches, that's over here with the orange lines. Then if we want to take the connection of these lines of this building on the right-hand side, that's the red lines, off again, way down here now. And then the vanishing point for this wagon that we have over the side is all the way over here. And so what we end up with is something surreal, something out of this world, something odd, something strange, intentionally so. This is De Chirico's quote about what he was trying to achieve. And he says that the phenomenon of the world is an enigma. So he's trying to capture how enigmatic the world at his point in time is. And he's done that through intentionally playing around with the vanishing points of the perspective. So that image is doing this. All right, some uses for architectural perspective. Who recognises this one? What do we see? Parliament. Yeah, this is Canberra. If you've been to the main mall in Canberra, this is looking up to Parliament House sitting here in the distance. But we can see it's a clear one-point perspective. So whenever, are you guys doing histories, illusions, symbolism, power in culture? Have you done that yet? Your theory unit? Last semester or now? Doing it right now. Okay. This is a perfect example of some of the things you'll be talking about. So they use a intense one-point perspective in Canberra, connecting the two centres of power. So they've got Parliament on one side, and they've got war and military on the other side with the Shrine of Remembrance. And they are starkly opposing each other at opposite ends of this great mall. And so you have this singular line of connection, which is emphasised by this vanishing point. And so you end up with perspectives like this, where 100% of our focus is on Parliament, or 100% of our focus, if we're looking immediately behind us, is on military at the Shrine of Remembrance. So we get symbolism from making these stark reminders as well. Then we've got things like this, quick hand tests. So we're testing out interior qualities of what space might look like. We might need to put something, like this together for a client. We can do that. What you must have all been doing over the last couple of weeks in the city, making site details and just taking specific moments from the city that are important to you. So you can see this is a one-point perspective as well. And if we look very carefully, you can still see the very first construction lines. We have leading lines going towards this centre point in the door, and that shows us where the stairs are going to go. And then from that point, we can figure out where the architrave is going to be and where all of this surrounding arch is going to be as well, based on that one-point perspective. This time at 2-point, we can create watercolor impressions if we want to make an example of what the building might look like. So these are very popular 60s, 70s, even 80s as well, of showing modernist buildings, postmodern buildings, what they might look like in the site, in context, by just watercolor on cartridge. Detailed artist impressions, so showing with great labor what something could or something does look like, so everything drawn in, but you can see once again that everything is in perspective. All of the books are in perspective, the sunken lounge is in perspective, which gives you an idea of what decade this was drawn. All of the buffeted ceiling is in perspective, all of the beams are in perspective, everything is connecting back to that one point. Something else that would be helpful for you all right now is 1 point down a street. So this is a perfect example of what I was talking about at the start, where you imagine your eye being pulled down into nothingness, and that is the vanishing point. And so we start at this exact pinpoint place, and then we extrude out of that, and that gives us the street, it gives us the building, it gives us the datum lines, it gives us things like these lights, and we can see that they're shrinking or growing depending on which way you're looking at it. Gives us the cars, gives us the crosswalk, gives us everything. Everything is coming out of that 1 point in space. And so even though this is drawn by hand on site, using the vanishing point allows us to bring more realism to the image because we have proportion. Site context integration, these were very popular as well in the 60s and 70s, showing what the house would look like relative to its position in site. Everyone should know what this house is. What's this house? Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright, thank you. All right, and then we get to what we're doing this semester, which is creating abstract collages using the photo montage technique, post-digital drawing. This is what we're doing after we come back from the tuition-free week. Week 8, we'll start looking at this. So we're using the lines that we get from our SketchUp model to create the perspective, and then we layer in materials and we layer in collaged imagery over the top to give an impression of what that space feels like to inhabit. Sectional perspective, also what we're doing, but not in this style. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you draw all of this. So this is by an architecture practice I love based in Tokyo called Atelier Bow Wow. And what they do as part of their architecture, they believe the drawings are as important as the end product. And so they draw every single detail of what's going on inside their space. And so this is a little ramen restaurant, very similar to what you'd find in Shinjuku. And you can see all of the people there. You can see even the chef making the ramen. You can see all of the sake bottles. You can see how you get upstairs. All of the details of how it's constructed. Everything is in there laboured perfectly. But it also gives a really strong impression of what it's like to inhabit that space. So the reason why we do both the abstract collage in a 1 point and then in a 2 point and the sectional perspective is because now it gives us an opportunity to look inside the building and outside of the building at the same time. So we can understand spatial relationships between the exterior, like we have over here, and interior, like we have in here. We can't really get that from a 1 point or a 2 point because they're either going to be outside or inside, not both. So a sectional perspective gives us the opportunity to do both. And this is what we're not doing. Very, very common, and you'll get to this when we get to 3rd year, and we start to look at architectural visualization. But for now, this is not what we're doing because this is kind of like end product design. Once you've finished designing, finished putting everything together and you want to show people what it's going to look like, you do this. Whereas the phase we're at right now is figuring out the design. So instead of using a perspective as a tool to sell something or to show the finished product, we're using perspective as a tool to figure out what it might be. So we're at the first end of the spectrum rather than this is at the opposite end of the spectrum. So that's why we're not doing this right now. Okay, so how do perspectives work? Now I want to preface this by saying this might melt your face a little bit, but don't worry, we're not actually doing the manual version of perspective. I'm just going to show it to you now so that you know where it comes from, so that you know where these rules come from. So if you get a little stressed in the next couple of minutes, don't worry, I gotcha. So this is how a manual perspective is drawn. This is the basic layout. What you do is you have a plan below, you have the back elevation that we're looking at. So this rear wall here, which we can see has got a long window in it, is this rear wall here with a long window in it. They're immediately projected one from the next. And then side by side, we have two elevations. So we can see this is a wall with a small window on the right with a box down in front of it, but not in front of the window. There we have elevation, small window, box down to the left. On the opposite side, if we're looking this way, we have a wall with no window and a box slightly off center to the right. Same thing over here with the elevation. So that's our setup. We have the plan, and then we have the corresponding elevations that we would see would we be standing in this room. We have the elevation in front of us, elevation to the left of us, and elevation to the right of us. From this point, we need to insert a person. So here where you see SP, traditionally what they called that was the station point, but you can just think of that as the person. That's where the person's standing. Then we need what's called a horizon line. The horizon line is our eye height. So this is typically 750 AFL, or above floor level. 750 is our eye height for drawings. Where the person intersects with the eye height is our vanishing point. So that's where the vanishing point comes from. Whenever you're drawing, whenever you're sketching, whenever you're thinking, make sure you remember that. The height of the person who's looking, that's giving us our horizontal dimension. Where they're standing is giving us the vertical dimension in space. And that's where the vanishing point comes from. So this is the reason why some perspectives can look really weird, is because the vanishing point's sitting too high, much higher than what it would be for a person actually standing inside the space. Or the vanishing point is offset from where the person would actually reasonably be standing, i.e. you've positioned them in such a way that they're standing out in the street, but you're trying to look at what's going on inside the room. So that's where that comes from. So just keep that in mind, horizon line, vanishing point, station point. Then what we do, and I won't labour too much on this, is we project all of the elements from the plan up into this space that we see here, and then from the vanishing point we go back through those marks. And if I go through that reasonably quickly, you'll see how that happens. Line by line, the depth of that window in the background again from the vanishing point. Then what we're going to do is we're going to chop off the ends, because we can see this box is getting too warped here, so we need a plane of view. So this is just the person's view. They've given it about 75 degrees, and there we have it. That's our perspective. So that's where that comes from. So this is the key takeaways that I really want you to remember, so that you can make sure you're applying the same thing into SketchUp so that it looks correct. So yes, we're not making them manually, we're making them in SketchUp, but if you don't get the basics covered, it's not going to look right. So the vanishing point is determined by the intersection of where the person is standing versus what their height is. So I'm standing on this edge of the room, the height is 1750, that is my vanishing point. A vanishing point is where all the lines lead back to. So if you have any lines that don't lead back to the vanishing point, it immediately distorts and warps the image, and it's really obvious when you're looking at it. Your friends will see it, we'll see it, and it doesn't quite work. So you need to make sure it's always leading back to that one point. Verticals are always vertical, and this is important to remember because SketchUp doesn't do this for you automatically, and it's the #1 thing students do wrong when they're doing their perspectives. You actually need to arrange the camera so that the lines are all vertical, and horizontals are always horizontal. So once again, you've got to arrange the camera to make sure it's doing this. So you'll have a perspective, but it won't be a 1-point perspective in SketchUp automatically. It will be some hybrid between a 1 and a 2-point. It won't quite work properly and it won't quite look correct. And then when you get into Photoshop and you try and lay your textures over the top, everything's going to be warped, and the more and more you layer into it, the worse it will look. So just make sure that you're keeping on top of this, and that you understand verticals are always vertical, like these orange lines we see here, and horizontals are always horizontal, like the red ones we see here. So they're not pointing back to the vanishing point. Orange isn't going back to blue, and red isn't going back to blue. Only the elements that are extruding back to the vanishing point have an angle. Everything else is orthogonal. And finally, for the 1-point perspective key takeaways, the vanishing point and the verticals and horizontals rule ensures that everything is in proportion. So when we start adding people into the scene, when we start adding trees into the scene, materials into the scene, everything that we'll layer in Photoshop must also be proportionate to the vanishing point. So what you do is you figure out how tall they would be at the back of the space, and then you project them forwards on these lines in Photoshop, and that will tell you exactly how big they need to be relative to where they are. So if you've seen examples of your friends' work from last year, maybe you've got some friends in upper years, and you can tell that the people aren't quite right, they're either too small or too big, this is where that comes from. So you always got to make sure that your people and objects are scaled relative to the vanishing point. Okay, so 2-point perspective. Again, we're not doing this manually, but I just want to show you where it comes from. So slightly different this time. What we're doing is now we're turning the plan on its side. So remember I said that if you're doing a 2-point, it's either a corner coming towards you or a corner pushing away from you. This time we have, as we can see, a corner coming towards us. So station point, once again, that's our little human. Then we have our plan with the corner coming towards us. And then we have at the back of the plan, so the rear of the building, what's called the picture plane. And that picture plane is going to be our scaled moment. Again, don't worry about too much about this stuff. The important part is that where the person now intersects with that picture plane gives us our vanishing point. So instead of just projecting upwards, that would only give us 1 point. We need 2 points. So instead, we have to extrude back to this arbitrary line that we've made in space, and that gives us our 2 vanishing points. Then what we'll see as we start projecting through vanishing point 1 and vanishing point 2, very similar to the last exercises, we're using the plan and the elevations to get our points in space, and they all project back to vanishing point 1 and vanishing point 2. So we'll see as we click through this, we've got windows going back to VP2, then we've got the extruded elements going back to VP1, the door going upward, still verticals are still vertical, and then we keep going through, we do our roof line, keep going, do all the tiles on the side of the building, the steps on the side, and we end up with this. And so we can see here that everything on this face of the building is projecting back to vanishing point 2. Everything on this face is projecting back to vanishing point 1. Another example, this time we're looking towards a corner, so we have that corner going away from us this time. And we continue projecting VP1 to VP2. And there we have it. So we're using the vanishing point to project back to this one, which is VP2 over the right-hand side, or this one, VP1 over this left-hand side. So key takeaways this time for 2-point perspective is, of course, we have 2 vanishing points, one pulling in each direction. They're determined by the view angle of the person, where that meets the height of the person. So if we're looking 90 degrees is typical for what we do for a 2-point perspective. Where that would come from, as we can see here, if we go back one, where that 90-degree position points out to that arbitrary plane we made in space, remember? That point there and that point there gives us our vanishing points. We're then projecting through lines in space, and all objects which are angled will go towards their vanishing points. The ones on the left will go this way, ones on the right will go this way. Only verticals remain vertical this time, so horizontals do not have to remain horizontal for 2-point perspectives because they're all going to be angled either one way or the other. 2 points can be used to visualize the interior of a room corner, or they can be used to visualize the exterior of a form. Okay, what about 3-point perspectives? So 3-point perspectives, as we pointed out before at the start, yes, you can have a 3-point, but it's going to do this. It warps the image way too much for what we do. So we can create 3-point perspectives like this if we want to, much like Giorgio de Chirico, be intentionally verbose about our architecture. We're exaggerating things. If we want to do that, that's fine. You can make a tall building look taller. You can really accentuate whatever you're trying to accentuate. But just keep in mind that this is not really a true perspective anymore. So the whole idea was of the perspective of the 1-point and the 2-point, if we think back through history, was to make it feel more real, to make it feel more proportionate, and to make it feel like we're actually standing within that space. So the 3-point kind of contradicts that, because it's throwing out the idea of making it real, of keeping the proportion and scale correct. So we can see here, this is pushing way, way higher than it is. So it starts to feel really, really tall and massive, and that it's doing too much. So if that image is too warped, then we know there must be some rules for perspectives. So I want to give you a checklist, and this will be in the lecture slides as well. I want you to come back to this when you're at the stage during tuition-free week that you're going to start exporting your SketchUp perspectives out, ready to Photoshop in week 8. So next week, when you're doing your sketching up, you come back to this checklist. So for 1-point perspectives, we've got this for all 3. There must be only one vanishing point. All angled lines must connect back to one exact point in space. All vertical lines must be 100% vertical, no warping. So you have to arrange the camera, massage it. It takes a while, but you'll get there. Must be 100% vertical, no warping. All horizontal lines, same thing. We can see here, horizontal is perfectly horizontal, vertical is perfectly vertical. And then all objects and materials, much like our person here, are in proportion to the vanishing point. 2-point checklist. Now we have to have 2 vanishing points. All horizontal lines must connect back to point 1 or point 2. There's no horizontal lines because they're all angled now. All vertical lines must still be 100% vertical like we can see here. And then once again, all objects and materials must be in proportion. Finally, for your sectional perspective. Now this depends on whether you're doing a 1-point or a 2-point sectional perspective. It's totally up to you. You can do either one. If you want to just cut through a slice like we looked at with the Atelier Bow Wow version, you can do that. If you want to do a 2-point like the one I'm showing here, you can do that as well. So take the rules from the 1-point slide, which we looked at just a second ago, if you're doing a 1-point sectional perspective. Take the rules from the 2-point if you're doing a 2-point sectional perspective. So here, I've done a 2-point. Horizontals and verticals must follow the same rules as before. All objects, like our person here, must be in proportion. And then some additional rules. Everything in the section should read as the cut. So much like your architectural drawings, everything that's cut through should either be all white, all grey, or all black. That's your 3 choices. So we can see here I've gone with the black. So everything that's cut through must be black. The slab, the walls, the slab above the roof, everything is filled out in black. You don't want to see any architectural fills inside this element. Then finally, there shouldn't be anything in front of the section cut. So this is a common mistake we'll see when we get to photoshopping. You stop thinking about the idea of a section and you're just trying to layer things into your image. And so you put a person in front of the section cut and a dog and a tree and a cat or whatever it is, without thinking that you're actually putting someone in the middle of no space. Because we've cut a section line, right? So there's nothing in front of us where that section is. There's only things beyond that section cut. So for example, here in this grey foreground in front of my building, that wouldn't be grey because in Photoshop I'd make it white. I wouldn't put anything there. I would only put people and things beyond that section cut. So only things above this first cut line into the background can have anything in there. Does that make sense to everybody? If you're putting things in front of the cut, it's just going to fall down into nothing. Okay, now very, very quick, I know we're going over again, is I want to do a quick example of some sketching. So, and if you want to follow along in your sketchbooks as well, it's a bit of fun. So hopefully you can all see what I'm doing. So when you draw your perspectives, what you want to do is just think about the rules that we've looked at today. So for example, if I want to draw a 1-point perspective, I know that I have a wall that's at the back, and I know that I have a person standing somewhere in there, and the height of that person. So if I want to stand somewhere over this edge of the room, and I know proportionally my person is about this tall, that gives me my vanishing point. The vanishing point can then push through that space. And we go through each of the corners, whoop, a bit wavy there, and that gives us our perspective. Within that perspective, we can start drawing people and things, and we can get vanishing point of our people in proportion, so we can make sure they're always going to be at scale, doing whatever they do. We can have vanishing point for window or something like that that we can project into the space to make sure, once again, that's in proportion as well. And all we're really doing is projecting everything back to that vanishing point. Now, to give you a bit of an example, if we have this wall here, hopefully you can still see it. If I move this vanishing point down into this bottom corner, watch what happens. All of a sudden, we have a much different scale. We give the idea that this room is much, much taller than it is, because remember, this is the height of a person. Same thing again, let's try another one. And we'll put the person way up here. all of a sudden, we're starting to feel much, much taller in the room, much, much lower. So the position that you put your vanishing point is going to change how the space feels. Likewise, if I draw right up close to this edge of this wall as my vanishing point, I'm going to get this super, super elongated wall on my right and a low wall on the left. So maybe you want to do something like a laneway in the city, and you want to really accentuate one edge over another edge. Like that. You want to accentuate this face over here so that you've got plenty of room to draw over the top. Maybe you've got some sort of architectural element that's coming out of the wall here that you want to play with. And that's why you want to focus on this wall more than the other. So changing where you put the vanishing point in that space is going to enable you to really shift the point of view, the perspective, so to speak. Now, we can do also 2-point perspectives. Let's go over here. So remember, it's either coming towards us or away from us. So if we've got perspective 1, perspective 2, and we've got a corner, we project that back, project it again, project it back, project it again. This time we're going to trim off the edges of the building, and then we have our very simple box in perspective. We could then also use this vanishing point over this side to create a 1-point that's going on over here. So for example, we might have a laneway that's happening out of there, and we want to project out of that laneway some space that's coming in there, and then maybe we have an edge or a return on that building that's coming out of here, and we've got some people and a path coming along that point. We can do whatever we want. But starting off with the vanishing points gives us opportunity to really play and explore as much as we need to. Eventually, you'll get to the point where you don't actually need to have the vanishing point in space. You'll just be able to kind of draw architecturally in proportion and think about how people start to navigate around and through these spaces. You'll be able to throw in some curves, things like that, do whatever you want to do, all in relation to the original vanishing point, just because that's the way you start to think as you draw. So start off by doing just the point and then extruding lines out in your 1-point perspectives and your 2s, and then eventually you won't need to put the point in. You just kind of be able to visualize it and think about it as you go. And then last one, which I find really fun, is your sectional perspective, which is great for design as well. So let's say we've got a section that does something like this. We've got this mass coming through here with a low light window and person is this kind of scale. What we can do is we can just chuck a vanishing point right in the middle of that. So we've got that person's head height. We know that that's going to be the heights of our vanishing point. And then we can project through that vanishing point out through the space here. Whoop. And we keep going through there. We have this line coming out through here, which is the front of this line here. And all of a sudden, we have a sectional perspective going over here, right? Savvy? This one should go up to there, this one goes up to there, but same thing. So starting off with a section, putting a vanishing point inside it, and then quickly sketching out through the edges gives you opportunity to create a sectional perspective with lots of depth that you can start to play in. By the same token, if you drew that section like this again, and you wanted to project backwards, you could put another vanishing point into there. Right? And that gives you a small space within which to occupy. So you can go forwards towards the eye, or you could go backwards away from the eye with your sectional perspective as you're drawing that. So another helpful tool. Hopefully that helps you in terms of your manual perspective drawing. The trick is to just think about where the vanishing point is, which comes back from the person's height and where you want them to be standing in space. If you want them right up against the wall so that one wall is more exposed than another, then you can do that. If you want it straight down the gut, so you're really, really focusing down the center point of the image, then that's fine as well. Okay, that's perspectives. Think about that. Most important now is to probably start putting together some perspectives of your own manually of what you think you might want to do in SketchUp. And that way, A, you'll have something to add to your process for your assessment, but B, you'll be able to cognise and think more about what perspectives you want to show before you actually show them.